Welcome back to our pledge interview this evening. Once again, you can call in and pledge your support to Africa Muslim Agency as they bring hope to the refugees of Lebanon with the theme or idea called Basamat. And we're going to be unpacking that, like I said, shortly in this interview with the donor liaison officer of the Africa Muslim Agency, Sister Khatija Abbas. Before the break, we were talking about your trip to Lebanon, a brief history of yourself also when you joined Africa Muslim Agency. You made mention of the experience of the children when you reached the refugee camps and they see a South African logo, they all went, "Go Bokke," yes. But alhamdulillah, very much laughter was brought to the children. Definitely. Let's now talk and focus about that emotional experiences that you have experienced with the people and the children of Lebanon.
I think just touching on what you're saying, you know, you come into the camps and yes, the first thing you see are children running at you and they're happy and they're joyous and they want to hug you. And that's the first impression they give you. As soon as you go into the tent, you approach one family, you go inside and you sit down with the family. You start speaking to them. You realize that that joy and that happiness, it's on one level, it's on a surface level. But when you go deeper and you start speaking to the family and they open up to you about their experiences, you realize that there is so much trauma that these families are facing, especially the children. You know, I will mention one story, I think, first before we move on. This is exactly my experience. We went into the camp on the Tuesday, our first day going into the camp, and we went in with a family and there was a little boy, his name was Ahmad. And you know, there was a mother and a father and two brothers and a sister and a grandmother as well. And we were speaking to him and asked him, you know, what is it you want? And, you know, is it school? Because all the children we speak to, they just want to go to school. And he said, you know, he always wanted to go to school, but he's completely lost hope of going to school. It's not a possibility. So all he actually wants is an ice cream. And he hasn't had an ice cream in years. He hears the ice cream truck and he comes into his tent and cries because that is an impossibility, let alone school. Sure. So you know, that joy that you see initially, it's trivial, shallow joy. But I think one story that really stood out to me personally and that really etched in me, having returned home, there's a boy, Amin, he's about 12 or 13 years old. And I've been speaking to him before I'd gone, video calling him and stuff like that with my family. And the reason for this, and you know, the story that I want to share with the donors and everybody listening is that Amin was only 6 years old and he was in Syria. Like every other day he went to school and the principal told the children, you need to go home. They didn't get any other information, just you need to leave. And you know, at the age of 6, he walked home from school and he got back to his home and he saw that his house had been bombed. You know, at the age of 6, his house had been bombed and both his parents were killed. So I think for us to kind of just imagine what that must be like for even someone our age, but as a child of 6 years old, you lose everything in the blink of an eye. A day started off normally. You greeted your parents when you left home and you came back and their bodies are laying in the rubble. So these are the things that these children are facing. You know, he didn't know where he was going, where he was sleeping. Eventually his grandfather, you know, found him and his sister. They were staying by their neighbors. And his grandfather took them over to Lebanon. But Amin was not able to interact with people. He wasn't able to communicate. If you see that level of violence and destruction, demolition, you know, especially at that young age, how are you potentially ever going to move on with your life? You can't have a life after that without psychosocial support.
That's where I think very important you talk about emotional trauma. For those that listen to stories like this or watch videos like that, it just has some sort of emotional trauma to a very least extent to us watching or hearing about stories. You can't even imagine what those people go through. So that's why you're talking about now the psychosocial elements of it. And this is why Africa Muslim Agency has come up with the Basamat theme. Before we even unpack that, I know we're keeping the viewers in suspense, but that's the whole idea. But inshallah, Sister Khatija Abbas will explain it to you in the next segment, inshallah, what it is all about. And thereafter, you can pledge in and call your support on the live pledge line. You're talking about emotional trauma of the children, and you talked about your interaction with those children. What has been the messages from those children?
You know what? The fact that I know, like you say, we're teasing them and we're going to tell the donors more about what they can do later on. But the thing that stood out to us, having spoken to Amin, having gone to the camp, actually, I just want to finish telling you about that because I spoke to him before having gone, and when I went there, I met him. And, I tried to mentally prepare myself for meeting him. I felt almost guilty, like, I'm a stranger coming in, I'm trying to help him. What can I potentially do for a boy that's lost everything? Who am I? It felt arrogant. But when I met him, I immediately just burst out crying. I couldn't believe I was face to face with him. And he told me, this is heartbreaking. He told me and my family, I video called my parents while I was there, and he spoke to us. And he said that this was the greatest joy he has felt since his parents were alive. And I think I think it's very difficult to understand the weight of that sentence. This is a child, he's not thinking of what to say to please anybody. He's only saying what he feels. And for me and my family, maybe you don't think you're doing a lot for a child, but any little bit you do can change their life. I thought I wasn't doing anything for him. But for him to say, this is the greatest joy I felt since my parents were alive. So for us supporting, the Basamat Center, Amin has gone through this program, and now he's actually able to communicate with you. He's able to interact. He laughs and makes jokes. And before going through this program, he couldn't do any of that. He was completely closed off. So by supporting these children with psychosocial support, you kind of give them their dream back. You give them their future back, because they've lost everything. So the only thing they could potentially have is their future.
It all comes back to what we've discussed about hope. We're giving them hope in whatever we are encouraging them. That side is to bring about the hope that they can achieve what they need to achieve. And bringing the joy to all those kind of children is through the generous support of the donors. Like Khadija made mention of, no matter how small we think that our action is, it has a huge impact on the lives of those in those kind of conditions. So no matter how small your donation is this evening, do call in and pledge your support to AMA's live pledge line here on ITV Networks.